Welcome. This is To Our Core with Katie Murray, and this is a place where we peel back our layers to uncover who we really are at our centre, at our core. And think of it as a chat with your bestie, the one who can make you laugh until your belly hurts, who is ridiculously unfiltered and will lovingly call you forward to help you cut through the noise and get real with yourself. Around here, nothing is off limits, and we are mixing this up with equal parts humour and heart, so let's dive right in. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to talk about something that sounds really simple, but actually it can be quite confronting when you actually really live and embody it. And that is that what we call in, we create. And not in like the fluffy sense, like just think positive and it'll happen kind of way, but in a more embodied, real, sometimes uncomfortable way. Because when we say things like, I value courage and I want more courage, life doesn't hand us confidence wrapped in a bow. It hands us moments where our voice might shake, where staying silent would feel easier, where we feel exposed, uncertain, and very aware of our fear. And when we say things like, I really want to channel patience in 2026, or whatever year you might be listening to this in, I really want patience. Life doesn't suddenly slow down for you. In fact, what you might see appear is delays, inconvenience, waiting rooms, emails that don't get answered, timelines that stretch far beyond what feels reasonable to you. And this is where people can get quite confused. They might be thinking, I asked for courage. Universe, I asked for courage, and why does everything feel harder for me since I've asked for that? Or you might be thinking, I am really calling in calm, and yet I've never felt more tested. Or I asked for growth, and yet I am feeling more uncomfortable than ever before. And yet this is the work. And more importantly, this is actually how your identity is shaped, because we often believe that calling in means receiving the result. However, in reality, we receive the conditions required to embody it. Life doesn't pass or bypass the nervous system. It doesn't override your patterns. It doesn't skip straight to the outcome where you have this sense of courage naturally bestowed upon you, like you wake up in the morning, you suddenly feel courageous. It says, okay, if you want to become this person, here is the training ground. And the training ground occurs through lived experience. Not all the pretty affirmations that you want to write down in a book and repeat over and over again, not the vision boards that are aesthetically pleasing. They are formed in the moments that ask you to respond differently than you used to. And this is why so many people feel like they're failing when actually they're in a process of initiation. And maybe you've even thought something like, why is this happening to me? When instead, what may be a better, more supportive question for you might be, who is this asking me to become? So let's talk about courage. I said it before, courage doesn't arrive as confidence. It actually arrives as fear. As fear with an invitation to do something differently, to choose something differently. You say you want courage and suddenly, guess what? You are given an opportunity to speak up when your voice wants to retreat, wants to go find a bush and hide underneath it. You are faced with a boundary that risks disappointing someone. You are called to be visible when hiding has always felt much safer. You feel the pull to say yes to something that stretches your identity. And in those moments, courage does not feel empowering. It feels vulnerable. It can feel exposing. it can feel like you might get it wrong. And this is where people often think, you know what, I've done so much self-development, I've done so much work on myself, and I thought I was healed. I thought I was past this. Why do I feel scared again? And the thing is, courage isn't something that you achieve just once and you go, tick a box, I've done it, I have courage now. It is something that you actually rehearse in real time over and over and over again. And each moment that you choose to act with fear, instead of waiting for fear to disappear, you are literally rewiring who you are. And that, my friends, is how identity starts becoming shaped. So let's use another example, patience. I remember before I became a mother, I was like, I really want to be that patient mother. Like I really want to be zen and chill and, not like lose my cool or be snappy or dysregulated with them. And yet, you know what? Kids, they can absolutely be the greatest learning environment for patients. Not because they calm and they're soothing and they never argue back and they never test your patience. It's because they do push your buttons. They do push the boundaries. They do challenge you. And most people say that they want patience because they think it will bring them a sense of peace. However, peace or patience in itself, that's not passive. That's not a bystander. It's an active regulation of your responses. So when you are calling in patience, guess what? Life says, okay, let's slow things down and see how you cope. And suddenly, plans, they fall through. Or things take longer than you expected. Or you're stuck in traffic. Or maybe it's you're taking your child to the supermarket and they want to stop and observe every little thing that they see on the way. The flower, the piece of rubbish, the person picking his nose. And you just are like, I want to get in and out of these shops. However, when you're wanting to call in patience, it is an experience that needs an environment to test it. Like you're waiting on someone else's timeline, or progress feels like it's invisible and it's not happening. And what's really being tested in those moments, it isn't your patience, it's your relationship with control. Because patience asks, can you stay grounded when you don't get to dictate the pace? Can you respond instead of reacting? Can you trust without rushing? What is this example asking of me to become? Every delay is an opportunity to choose frustration or presence, contraction or softness, old reactions or new regulation. And once again, through these experiences, your identity is taking shape. And you're either reinforcing, I can only be okay when things move fast or at my pace, or you're learning, I can stay regulated even when life does not feel like it's cooperating with me. So let's name a few more that you might resonate with, because once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. So let's use self-worth. A lot of people come to me when they're working and they're approaching coaching and they say, I really, really want to embody self-worth. And when you call in self-worth, you are likely to be placed in situations where you are undervalued, you are tempted to over-explain yourself, you are asked to choose yourself without external validation, because self-worth is built when you stop negotiating your value. When you make a stand and you say, I'm important here, and what I want, what I need, and what I think is important here. What about trust? When you call in trust, you may experience feelings of uncertainty. You may experience a sense of lack of clarity or moments where outcomes feel very much out of your hands. And yet trust is learned when certainty is removed. When you're no longer operating from the place of, I must be certain in order to act. It is the trust that in spite of it all, you will make it work. You will be okay because you believe in yourself. That is where trust is there. It's an internal process. What about compassion? People might come to me and say, I really want to work on being a more compassionate person. And when you call in compassion, guess what? You are going to meet some really difficult people. You are going to find yourself in misunderstood dynamics, and you are going to have to deal with your own shadow responses. Because guess what? Compassion isn't developed in comfort. It's actually forged through friction. It is forced through needing to practice compassion, not by just feeling compassionate. What about boundaries? A lot of people that I work with are like, I really find it very difficult to establish boundaries and stick to them. Well, when you call in boundaries, you are likely to attract people who want to test them. You are likely to feel guilt responses when you do try and enforce them. You are likely to feel a discomfort around saying the word no. Boundaries, they don't appear when it's easy. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to enforce them. They appear when saying yes would betray yourself, and yet you still stand by them. They appear when saying yes would betray yourself, yet you make a choice to stand by them because those boundaries are in place for a reason. And I've talked about on my Instagram about boundaries before, and I have talked about like rigid boundaries, which means that like there's no flex to them. They are very like set in stone, and how that can be really useful. And a lot of these strategies that we implement in our lives, they have served a purpose at one point in time. However, the overdoing of that, and particularly in regards to rigid boundaries, might mean that you deprive yourself of opportunities or experiences because you have this boundary. And I'm not sure if I discussed it like in this podcast or whether or not it's just via my Instagram, but a really great example might be that you have like a really firm boundary that you will not engage in any socializing with your work colleagues outside of work. And you think that that's really great for you to be able to define that line between work and your personal life. And while that might be really constructive and helpful and supportive for you in so many ways, it could, when applied rigidly, deprive you of opportunities of connection, of collaboration, and of actually developing trust and rapport with those that you see every day when you go to work. Whereas you can have porous boundaries, and they are so wishy-washy. They are so vague that while you may kind of know them, certainly no one else knows them. And so they don't know where the line is and when they're overstepping it. So, that can breed like a whole heap of resentment inside you because you're like, they're breaching a boundary. However, if you keep moving the boundaries, you say yes sometimes and no another time, or, you believe in yourself that this is how things need to be, and yet you don't show up embodied and aligned in the behaviors that support that, guess what? No one's going to abide or adhere to your boundaries because you're not. And then there's healthy boundaries. And the healthy boundaries are when you not only set them for yourself, you articulate them. Because a boundary is not a boundary if the other person doesn't know them. We can't expect people to know what our boundaries are. However, we can communicate them in a way that is completely compassionate, which is completely human, and which is not offensive. And then we set that. And then the next level of healthy boundaries is that if someone crosses them, you hold it. You remind them of what your boundaries are without the over-explaining, without the justifying. You say, that's not for me, I don't do this. And then you set the boundaries without moving it. And that's where everything comes together, is when you stand by your boundaries. Because if you don't, you'll betray yourself. And that's when Like, identity is not who you say you are. It's actually who you practice being under pressure. The moment when someone does try and push that boundary with you. And every time life presents a moment, I just want to invite you into choice. I want to invite you into choice. To speak instead of being silent for things that matter to you. To pause instead of reacting. To stay instead of abandoning yourself. So no longer going with the crowd to people please, but actually asking yourself, what do I want? What do I need? What's important to me? Because you're casting a vote every time you stand by yourself for the person that you're becoming. And guess what? Your nervous system, it keeps score. Unconsciously, it's keeping a checklist and it learns. You know what? I set a boundary and then I reinforced it when it was breached, and I can survive this. You know, courage? Yeah, it's uncomfortable sometimes, and yet I can hold this discomfort. I get to show up differently, and that is why growth can sometimes feel repetitive. You are not being punished. The universe is not against you. You've asked for patience. It's going to give you opportunities to practice it. It wants to strengthen you. And the same themes show up until your responses change, until that is who you are, embodied. And when it does, your life has to shift because you have. So let's ground this in something really practical for you, because you might be like, yes, that makes 100% sense. And also, I've got no idea. I've got no idea how to face those moments when I feel like the universe is challenging me in the initiation training ground. So first of all, a strategy I'd like to share with you is naming the quality, not the problem. So when something challenging arises, ask yourself, what quality is this inviting me to practice right now? So instead of the, why me? Why is this happening to me? Ask yourself, is this courage? Is this patience? Or is this trust that I'm being invited to practice right now? And this, it will instantly change you from victimhood to complete and utter self-leadership. Strategy 2, regulate before you respond. Identity is shaped in the pause. A theme you hear often in this podcast is my invitation to you to pause. So before reacting, take a big, deep, slow breath. This hustle culture, this need to respond so quickly, rapidly, instantaneously, like we should have responded yesterday already, just take a deep breath. Feel your feet on the ground. Let your body just settle, even if it's just 5%. You don't need to respond perfectly. However, if you want to shift and change the way you are and who you are becoming, you do need to respond consciously. And when we react, we are operating from our unconscious patterns, our beliefs, our values, and the stories that we have carried throughout our life, often formed through beliefs that weren't even our own. When we pause, we get to choose something different for ourselves consciously, and that is where new patterns are built. Strategy number 3, track the evidence of who you're becoming. So at the end of each week, reflect, where did I choose differently here? Where did I stay present instead of reactive? So where did I pause before I reacted and chose to respond instead? Where did I act in alignment with whatever I'm calling in, whether it be courage or self-trust or self-worth or patience? Where did I act in alignment, even when it felt hard or uncomfortable? Because you know what this does? It builds internal validation. So you stop outsourcing your worth to outcomes or other people's approval. And before I close this episode, I want to gently name something that connects very deeply with everything that we've talked about today, because this idea of what we call in, we create, it's also the exact place where so many people start to judge themselves. They notice the challenge, they feel the discomfort, they notice the repetition, and instead of seeing it as an initiation into a new identity, they label it as, oh my God, the universe hates me, or something must be wrong with me, or there I go again, I'm sabotaging myself. Why do I always do this? Why do I always do this? And here's what I want to say clearly to you. Self-sabotage, it is not a flaw in your character. It is absolutely a protective response shaped by your nervous system. And it may have protected you at some point and kept you very safe at times, and so you realized, even unconsciously, that this has worked for you until it doesn't. And when you call in courage and patience and trust and self-worth, self-sabotage is often the first thing that's going to surface, because the system is saying, no, we don't do that. This is very unfamiliar. And what do I know about unfamiliar is it could be a potential threat because I can't predict the outcome. So therefore, this actually might be quite unsafe. And you know what? This is not the tactic or the strategy that we've used in the past. And so therefore, this is not how we've survived before. So what do you start to see show up for you? Procrastination appears. Self-doubt gets louder. The avoidance of things kicks in. And you know what? Overthinking ramps up. It turns the dial right up, and not because you are incapable. It's because your system hasn't yet learned how to hold the new identity that you're stepping into. And this is exactly why I created the Self-Sabotage Solution. Everything that we've talked about today lives at that intersection of identity and nervous system safety. You do not self-sabotage because you lack desire, the desire for change, the desire to do things differently. Your self-sabotage, its growth, it outpaces your regulation, and therefore it can feel unsafe. And so the self-sabotage solution is not about fixing you. I want to be very clear. I do not work with any clients, whether it's in a group program or in my one-to-one coaching containers. I do not believe that you need to be fixed. However, I'd love to see it happen in schools from a very early age. However, I teach your system how to stay present inside of expansion, inside of identity upgrades, so that when courage is required, you don't freeze. When patience is tested, you don't spiral or snap or lose your freaking cool. When uncertainty shows up, you don't abandon yourself to old patterns or people just to have familiarity, just to have what's certain and what's known to you, even when that's not supporting you. Instead, you'll learn how to recognize self-sabotage patterns as they arrive. In this program, you will understand what they're protecting you from. You will respond with regulation instead of self-attack or defensiveness, and you'll build capacity for the identity that you're calling in. And this is the missing piece for so many people. They know what they want to embody, but they haven't been shown how to stay safe while becoming it. And that's what the Self-Sabotage Solution offers you. Now, I want to share this in a way that feels really transparent for you. At the time of recording this episode, we are halfway through the current intake for the January 2026 round of the Self-Sabotage Solution. And as of right now, spots are almost filled. And because this podcast episode will live on well beyond this moment, I want to make sure that no matter when you're listening, you know exactly where to go to next. If this episode has been speaking to you, if you have been recognizing yourself in the patterns or the behaviors or the scenarios that I've been talking about, if you feel that you're being invited into a new way of showing up and yet something just keeps pulling you back, you will find the link in my bio for the Self-Sabotage Solution. The link will do one of two things. If there are still spaces available, it will invite you to apply. If this round is already full, it will place you on the wait list for the next intake. And either way, it's going to keep you connected. This is not about pressure. It's not about forcing timing. It's just one aligned next step for you if this and what we're talking about today has resonated. And if there's one thing I want to leave you with here, it's this: that the life that you're calling in doesn't require a stronger, more determined, more disciplined mindset. It requires a safer nervous system. Okay? Depending on what time of the year you're listening. However, I think it's a year-long theme that we just need to do better, we need to try harder, we need to push more. And I've got a different perspective, and that is that you don't need to try harder. This is not a matter of lack of effort. You need to feel supported while you practice becoming the identity that you want to be. The person that does what they say they're going to do, the person that shows up for them, the person that speaks up even when their voice shakes and evidences that the world won't implode when they do demonstrate courage. And that's what this space is for. So whether this is the moment that you step into the work with me, or simply the moment that you begin seeing yourself with more compassion, I want this episode to remind you that you are not broken. You do not need fixing. You are not behind. You are in the exact training ground required for who you are becoming. And if you take nothing else from today, take this: you are not failing when things feel hard. You are not behind when life tests you. The universe is not out to get you, and you are not doing it wrong because discomfort shows up when you try and exercise the things that you're trying to call in. You are in the becoming. And what you call in, unfortunately, we don't receive it as a gift wrapped up in a beautiful bow. You receive it as an invitation to practice what you're asking for. And every time you meet that invitation, imperfectly, somewhat shakily, and honestly, you are shaping an identity that no circumstance can take from you. So thank you, as always, for being here. Thank you for doing the work, even if it's just listening to this podcast. Awareness is the first step to change, and I can't wait to speak to you next time. Thanks for spending time with me today on To Our Core. If something landed in your heart or gave you a much needed giggle, consider sharing it with a friend who also may need this as a timely reminder. And go on. You know you want to. Give me a 5-star review so that this podcast can land in the ears of many, many more people. Because remember that life is too short to stay on the surface. Keep living, loving, and laughing all the way to your core. Go make life great. And if you want support around this, go to the show notes to find out more. Until next time, I'll meet you back here with more truth, laughter, and a whole lot of heart.